So your soul will be torn apart momentarily as Forever Horror Month explores one of the most bold and iconic horror films of all time. Clive Barker's Hellraiser. Having believed to have gone to the limits of human sensation, Frank Cotton is tempted to solve an unassuming puzzle box that is actually a gateway to hell, where Frank is given an experience beyond the limits of pain and pleasure, indivisible. Soon thereafter, his brother Larry moves into the Cotton family residence alongside his unhappily married wife Julia, who once had her passions ignited by Frank. They are soon joined by Larry's own daughter Kirsty, who attempts to make her stepmother feel welcome. However, when Larry's own blood drips upon the floor where Frank met his hellish fate, it begins to resurrect him into a gruesome, fleshless state. Convincing a troubled yet tempted Julia to help him, she begins to lure unsuspecting men into Frank's grasp, to use their flesh to become whole and alive again. Yet it is only a matter of time before the Cenobites, Hell's own twisted priests, discover that Frank has escaped them, and soon even the most innocent of this family will encounter unspeakable evil that will threaten to consume their flesh and condemn their souls. So how could I resist delving back into the macabre imagination of Clive Barker, which in 1986 spawned the novella The Hellbound Heart, which became the basis for this film, and produced through New World Pictures on a budget of $1 million, definitely made a strong impact, garnering back $14 million of his box office take, and it was surely a film that broke the molds of horror and shocked and startled audiences, which was entirely what Clive Barker was aiming for at the time. And this was the feature film directorial debut of Clive Barker after he had already done a couple of short films back in the 70s, and already had a couple of his works already adapted to the screen previously with not the greatest of success. But Hellraiser was a film that was definitely unlike anything else anyone had seen up to this point, because especially in the latter half of the 80s, you got a lot of fatigue from the slasher movie boom, all these franchises very much saturating the market, and the MPAA coming down very hard on the horror genre, cutting down a lot of the graphic violence, all the graphic stuff in all these films, the gore and the blood, all this type of stuff. When you see something like Hellraiser just come out and just being completely different and just showcasing a very bold and exciting, unbound imagination, is bound definitely to alter the course of horror and inject a brand new life of sorts into the entire genre, whether it's film or print. Clive Barker definitely made a very solid statement, and a very bold one at that, when this film was released. And it's the fact that his vision is so crystal clear and so magnificently brilliant that you see it right from the beginning of this film. Within the first 6 minutes of the film, you're introduced to very bold, fascinating, and intriguing visuals in this whole thing, where you see Frank opening up the box, and the beautiful lighting in this whole thing, and the appearance of the Cenobites, all these things that are just like, you couldn't start a horror film in a much more just gripping type of way, just introducing something like this, which is, again, from a very fertile imagination, showing you something that just like, I gotta see where this stuff goes. Seeing the Cenobites show up, and again, the graphic nature of the film, the gore, the blood, the torturous aspect of everything, and then it just disappears, leaving you with this whole mystery, and then feeding you into this very relatable domestic situation with the Cotton family, which is one of the things I really like about this film, above all the other Hellraisers, is the base story of this whole thing. You have this sort of exploration of human evil, that the characters of the Cenobites are very much in the background of the film. They're sort of facilitators in the type of way of the plot, where you have the real story here with the human characters exploring that end of things. You're seeing the exploration of
human desires and the temptations and the sensuality and the seduction, that you get, again, a very relatable type of story at the forefront of this, with very fascinating and horrific type of imagery and ideas in the background of it. But you just have that great exploration with the characters of Frank and Julia, that it just feeds you through a very interesting story, that you see the temptations that Julia has and how it drives her to be this murderous type of character through the whole film. It just weaves together this very fascinating type of plight that the character of Julia has. She has this very safe, monotonous, and average, everyday type of marriage, versus the temptation of this dangerous and exciting experience that she once had with Frank, and this tearing of her soul inside of her, just pulling back and forth throughout. That you do see a certain conflict there, that as the film goes along, you definitely see that she doesn't want anything bad to happen to Larry, but obviously things just get pushed to much more extremes as the film goes along, and we know where things go from there. But just that interesting thing that she's, up to a certain point in the film, not willing to sacrifice the person that she does want to be with the man that she just is enraptured with overall. But it's just those fantastic qualities from Clive Barker's imagination that makes Hellraiser the fascinating type of film that it is overall. But it is an imagination that I feel is supported by what I feel is an excellent cast in this film, starting off with the introductory performance of the great Ashley Laurence, who just brings a great fresh-faced quality to the character of Kirsty Cotton, that there's an easily charming and relatable, likable quality to this character overall, who just really has a very good sense of purity to her, that she doesn't feel like she's been tainted by seduction and temptation, all the evil that is permeating throughout the rest of the film. This is definitely a character that's presented to us in the most bright type of fashion possible, that you can very much feel right away that this is a character that you're going to be able to deeply sympathize and empathize as this film goes along. And you just see so many great qualities in Ashley Lawrence's performance here, between, again, the very charming and likable, sympathetic stuff, but also when you get into these scenes where she has to sell the terror and the fear of this film. She is magnificent what she does, because it is all just petrifying terror that you can see on her face in these moments where she just sees something and is absolutely horrific. But it's great that you have this character that just still shows a certain amount of strength, that when she encounters the monstrous version of Frank, that she still has the ability to stand up to him. She doesn't crumble and fall into like a pile of jelly or whatnot. She's still a character that can fight back and still has strength about her, and just asserts herself overall. So it's a very interesting character that has certain vulnerabilities, but also has the strength to be able to push forward and lock in with the audience as a very strong heroine in this film. I think she does a great performance overall. But an actor I just absolutely adore is Andrew Robinson, that everything I see him in is just absolutely perfection. That a lot of people would know him from his first major role in Dirty Harry as a Scorpio, but I know him so well from Cobra and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where he played the fantastic character of Garrick, which absolutely fits within a lot of Andrew Robinson's insights about playing more evil or shady type of characters, people with a lot of secrets. He does a fantastic job, and just like in Hellraiser, it's definitely one of his best performances, because the range he has to put on this film, portraying, first off, the absolutely just slightly naivete of the character of Larry here, that he's just completely oblivious to everything that's really happening under the surface of his wife, Julia, here. But Andrew Robinson just does a fantastic job, just sort of capturing your heart in a certain way, that the character of Larry is a bit endearing, even though he might be he's a squeamish type of guy. He doesn't have a lot of backbone, but just this guy that you can definitely see, especially when you have Larry there with Kirsty in certain sequences. You just see that wonderful, touching, heartfelt bond between these characters that just absolutely feel the father-daughter relationship and such touching type of quality, that it is a film that has certain moments of heart that just adds that to make you care about these characters who are going to be full of very gruesome type of scenarios that you get someone like Andrew Robinson here who just fully puts himself into any role that he has, commits himself fully to every aspect of that character. And as Larry, I think he just does some fantastic type of things that definitely shows a very strong, compassionate side of this character. But you definitely see later on in the film, as anyone would know who's seen it, that he takes on the complete opposite spectrum of the whole thing, and again, commits himself entirely to being the character Frank within Larry's skin, and just like, man, does he just relish every second he has on screen portraying the character of Frank in Larry's skin. He is just eating up every second of it and loving every moment. He just like steals the show at that moment in time. Just like the fact that he just has this wide range and portrays two starkly different characters and does them with the same level of excellence. Andrew Robinson is a fantastic actor and just absolutely fantastic. Just see him tackle something with so much meat and substance on both ends of this thing. I think he does, again, a magnificent performance here that just eats up the screen, but not in a knowingly sort of winking at the camera type way. He's just fully committed to either the very wholesome type of character of Larry or the completely salacious and murderous type of character of Frank here at the end of the film. Awesome performance from every step of the way, and like I said before, you definitely get a very strong sort of progression of the character of Julia here through the performance of Claire Higgins, who I think also does a great performance here. That you just see right from the beginning of the film that there is that friction, there is that turbulence in this marriage and everything, and she is definitely the one who definitely does not seem happy that the family's upped and moved from Brooklyn to this new place, which is, they walk into the place is an absolute dump of the highest order, and she just, every step of the way, she's not happy. She's very frustrated with things, and then once she starts reminiscing about her passions with Frank, that just lights something in her. It's just like she is so drawn to that temptation, that sensation that she had of danger and excitement that she had with Frank, that the performance Claire Higgins puts on just sells that yearning and that turbulence and that turmoil and conflict within this character. That it's very interesting that, again, progression of the character, that when she first has to start going out and luring these men in to be fed to Frank so he can reform himself, at first she seems very terribly rattled and shaken by the experience, but as it goes along, she almost becomes kind of enjoys it. There's almost this repulsion, compulsion type of thing going on with her, that she almost becomes seduced by the graphicness and the violence and just going out and doing this type of thing, and just whatever it is, just she becomes so much ensnared by it, and she becomes such a cold, distant type of woman, a wicked type of woman too, that this character just being swallowed up by her passions and everything. That the real monsters of the film are not the Cenobites, these demonic entities that have got torturous, twisted physiques. Characters of Frank and Julie are the ones who are the real monsters of the film. And it's very interesting to note that even though the film was cast with a number of British actors, including Sean Chapman and Oliver Smith, who portrayed the skinned and unskinned versions of Frank, the studio decided to replace all their dialogue with American accented actors instead. But still, the performances overall do come through with a lot of great penetration. That I really like the two versions that we see of Frank. First, portrayed by Sean Chapman, the one that we see before he encounters the puzzle box and the Cenobites, has a great magnetic presence about him. Just that sort of dark, brooding type of thing that he has going on when he just tracks the character of Julia to him so much. It just, again, the magneticism about him is very potent in the film. But after he comes back and you have Oliver Smith portraying the one in without the skin and everything and having him reform, he still has a certain allure to him, that even though he is this sort of obviously grotesque type of figure and everything, the idea of Frank still compels her towards him. And just the performance that Oliver Smith also puts on is very compelling too. That every second he has on screen is very easy to look at and just absorb it so much of what he does, and just a little bit here and there. I really like what he does. It just, again, real good presence that he carries on that same type of thing that Sean Chapman brought to the role. So it's a very good sort of consistency between the two actors, bringing forth a complete character overall, and just very good stuff overall with all the acting in this film, especially when you get into the Cenobites themselves, that even though they kind of thought about maybe bringing in and using a lot of just like stunt people, whatnot, to kind of fill up some of the roles that didn't have as much dialogue or whatnot, or all the Cenobites themselves, Clive Barker still wanted actual actors in the role to bring forth a certain sense of personality, certain nuance, as it were, and just, you can't argue that at all, because if you had just some random stuntman trying to rattle off some dialogue here, it would not hold the weight that Doug Bradley brings to lead Cenobite in this film that we end up knowing later on as Pinhead, that whether or not they actually did some like post-production sort of tweaking to kind of give more bass in his voice and try to alter it a little bit, he still brings on such a chilling performance in this film. And just one of the things that Clive Barker was telling him on set and everything, just like, take it down, less, bring it back. And Doug Bradley ended up understanding that the less he tried to really try and project or whatever it is, convey towards the audience, the makeup of the character would do. A lot of that work, it only had to do was just bring a little bit into it to just sell it overall, just like perfect. Between Clive Barker, what he decided to, how he decided to direct it, and the vision that he had with these characters, and how Doug Bradley just overall just brought that chilling presence, and the presentation of the Cenobites overall is just threatening and frightening, that you go ahead and watch a lot of the sequels and how things get watered down, and the presence and all that type of stuff of the Cenobites really just feels rather lukewarm, again, watered down. There's not as much impact on their presence in a lot of the sequels, but you see them here in this first film and used very sparingly when the story demands that they be there. There is just a sudden type of weight when they appear in the film. I just watching this again, I still got tensed up and a little bit frightened or whatnot, just from every little thing that they used, between the bright lights or whatnot when they come and visit Kirsty, and just the blinding white light, whatever it is, everything that is used to the presentation of the Cenobites in the first film just brings so much to the table, and just no question whatsoever, no surprise how much of an impact these made on our audience. So it's a very interesting presentation of these characters overall, between the performances, the vision on hand, and the fantastic timeless makeup effects work in this film, that I love what Clive Barker brings to this whole thing, that you have a lot of grotesque imagery and very creepy, disgusting type of stuff, but there's such a magnificent, macabre beauty about all of it, that how it's photographed, how it is presented, it's almost like a certain work of art, that these aren't just gory effects for the sake of shock cinema. These just have a certain artistry and sort of brushstroke type of quality to everything. It's just interesting to see how all this stuff stands up 25 some odd years later. Just magnificent how the depth on a $1 million budget you could get to all this makeup effects work, between everything to do with the different phases that they have Frank go through on his regeneration process, and just the detail on everything on him and all the Cenobites too, and everything else that they have to do in this film. It looks absolutely spectacular, and in all these years later has not shown a single flaw in my view. It is absolutely remarkable, and it just adds so much to the film, that you get so many creepy visuals in this film because of the fantastic cinematography on hand, showing off a lot of shadowy type of visuals, and just using a lot of different lighting patterns to just make everything look so moody and atmospheric, but also, again, highlight certain beauty in the film too. And it's very interesting that the house that they were shooting in was a real house, and Clive Barker didn't realize until they actually started shooting how difficult it would be shooting a setting where you can't move walls around and everything. It was very cramped spaces, so they had to be very inventive with what they could do with the cinematography and a lot of the tighter corridors and everything in the house. And I thought they did a lot of good stuff in that type of way, adding in some good, nice angles and everything, and just playing certain shots out in very long takes to just make everything fit and work very well. They didn't look awkward or whatnot. They really took their time on probably what wasn't a very comfortable type of shooting schedule to really come up with some very creative ways of shooting around a lot of this not abundant area to shoot in. And I just love the sort of gritty, dirty type of feel that the film has overall. That, again, you got this kind of rundown, sort of craggy looking house and everything. The dirt of it, all of it, that just soils an audience and just comes through so salacious on screen. Everything, certain sleaze factor to it, just every little thing with the gore in this film and how the film is just lit and shot and just everything they do to present his vision on screen is very, very good. But of course, there's a couple of effects in the film that don't quite hold up very well, such as the engineer monster that Kirsty encounters first in that entry to hell, and later on near the end of the film. Yeah, it looks pretty stiff and not very convincing, and they try to hide it as much as they can with some shadowy lighting and a lot of quick cuts and everything, but you can definitely see the stark limitations on trying to realize that very sort of less humanoid type of creature where they'd have someone behind the whole thing running it down the corridor, where in a couple of little shots here and there you can kind of see the shadows of someone's feet behind it. So it's like stretching the budget a little further than it could really go there to make everything work. But whatever the case, he also got some of those lower quality rotoscope animation effects at the end of the film, which apparently Clive Barker says that he spent a weekend with some Greek guy working on all these rotoscope effects and getting liquored up in the process. So it's like, and because they're running out of budget, so that's why they had to do it that way, and they don't quite very much look terribly good. And some of the things in the climax of the film I feel kind of show off the rough edges of the film a little bit, especially with those effects, and a couple other little things here and there that it just becomes sort of a weird sort of escape the monsters in the house type of thing, where everything else leading up to the whole thing where everything involving Frank gets dispatched with and everything, I think is absolutely fantastic in the film. The storyline you follow with that and the climax and the build up to all of it, I think is absolutely phenomenal. But after that, just like, you got all these extra elements in the whole film that you just have to get rid of and resolve and whatnot. You can't just end the film right there. So it's like, this is one of those things in the film that's like, it's not the best, strongest, most substantive ending beyond that point where Frank gets ripped apart and ends with that line that Andrew Robinson suggested instead of the outright insult of "fuck you," offered up the fantastic line of "Jesus wept," which add a completely different quality to his performance overall. That just what he does in that moment is just holds such a eerie, creepy type of quality. And up to that point, the film just does so many fantastic things that just pays off that storyline greatly, that you see the culmination of that evil sort of dark reunion between Julia and Frank and everything, how absolutely terribly soulless and evil it's become when they kill Larry and he takes his skin and everything. Just like, it's so chilling and creepy and overall. But again, after that moment, you just got to allow the quick tie-up of everything. You got to send the Cenobites back, and Kirsty's got to escape. And then that sort of thing at the end of the film, which never gets followed up in any of the sequels, that this sort of vagrant that turns into the winged beast and everything is supposedly a guardian for the puzzle box. And it's, again, part of the lore of Hellraiser that never got revisited in any of the sequels, and certainly did a bit of retcons here and there when they went into Hellbound Hellraiser 2. That, again, at the end of the film, it's implied that the house gets destroyed, burned down or whatnot, but obviously it's there in the sequel. But that's nothing to levy against the first Hellraiser, because I just think it is just a hell of a good film, if you want to consider that a pun or whatnot, but it's very much apt, including the incredible score by Christopher Young in this film, that it just mixture again of Clive Barker's ideas and his talent overall that brought forth such a different type of horror score that it definitely brings forth a lot of sort of feeling of gothic horror in a certain way, that it feels bigger and richer and has more of a breadth and depth to everything that you see in a lot of other horror films, that just has a bit more of a grandiose type of feel to it, but still has those moments of simplicity in the score that just gets you going, and everything just gets the hair standing up on end, your nerves kind of twitching and whatnot, just like it has those moments, but it has, again, such a beauty to how he composes this entire score from the theme on downward. Just creates a completely different style of horror film that a lot of people would have seen up to this point. I just think everything melded together inside and out from Clive Barker's imagination and into all these other talents on display here. Just realized such a great and sort of intimate type of personal story in a certain way that a lot of the other sequels went bigger and better and wider, and some of it went right into the shitter too, but getting a really tight and intimate type of story here that just deals with temptation and seduction and all these different human desires that goes between beyond pleasure and pain or sin or anything. This is a completely different type of idea and a completely different type of vision on display that I just really love. The first Hellraiser more than any other film in the franchise, that for a long time I did feel like Hellbound was right on the same level. Obviously Hellbound goes forward and explores much more the mythos of Hellraiser and Leviathan and Hell and the Cenobites overall, and that is very fascinating to see, but I just really love the first Hellraiser the best because of the intimacy of the story overall. That's what compels actually Laurence towards this film the most. She feels that that's why this is the strongest of them all. This is the one that she enjoyed working on the most, and just overall I think everyone I've seen interviews of in this film really just feels compelled towards this film the most because of that quality of the story overall and the interesting themes and ideas that it has weaving in and out of the human soul and everything. And in general, I think Hellraiser is just a fantastic film that Clive Barker definitely, at one point in one of the DVD featurettes or whatnot, I believe recorded sometime in the last decade, just felt like he had exhausted all observations and insights that he had on the film. Just felt like it wasn't really a film that was his anymore. They felt like it belonged to other people now, whether it be the fans or franchise star Doug Bradley. Just felt like it belonged to other people now, and they can explore it and have more of a connection to it than he has at this point. But obviously there's been talk for many, many years now of a potential remake that Clive Barker has been involved on and off with, and just really hasn't been going anywhere at the Weinstein Company and the mentioned films, and don't know what's going to happen with that anytime soon, if ever. But they're definitely a studio that likes to hold on to their rights, and one way or another I'm sure we'll be getting another Hellraiser film at some point in time. But the fact of the matter is, it's a damn good movie that I think does have its rough edges here and there. I would definitely agree with Clive Barker a bit that it's not 100% solid and perfect. Obviously some effects aren't all that fantastic in the film, that fall off when the budget got a little shorter or stretched beyond its limits of what it could really kind of convey and everything. But everything else, the ideas, the vision, everything here, the presentation and overall talent that brought forth this film, is still stands up fantastically today, and I would definitely rank it among many of my favorite horror films of all time. Really excited to get Hellraiser reviewed for you guys this year. So it wasn't one I really planned on, but it's like I just got the inclination to do it, and I needed to get another big horror classic in this month. So thanks for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here from my review, your thumbs up on the video is extremely well appreciated. Again, comments about the discussions of everything Hellraiser or Clive Barker in general is also greatly encouraged. And of course, the most important thing would be spreading the links around to get other people interested in this stuff. If you do feel like other people would definitely enjoy what I have to offer you guys here. And gotta be winding things up. We're past the halfway point now. Gotta be winding things up and kind of trying to get a couple more videos done for you. And keep your eyes out. There's a lot of classic horror films returning to theaters this month. Keep your eyes peeled. You might want to check out some things in theaters and get really immersed into the horror atmosphere before the month is over. So, thanks for watching again. I'll be back soon, and hope you've enjoyed Forever Horror Month up to this point. So we can get a little bit better from here on out. So, take care, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.